would you do if you dropped out of college, pursued 12 different ideas, but none of them worked, and only had 50 cents in your bank account at one point? Would you give up or persevere? Well, my guest today, Arnav Bathla, decided to keep charging forward because he believes he was born to be an entrepreneur, and he couldn't possibly see any other option. So Arnav is originally from India, and after dropping out of college and booking a one-way ticket to San Francisco over 2 years ago, where he essentially burned his boats, he played around with different ideas during that time, but almost none of them solved a pressing problem. He went from idea to idea until at some point in his journey, he had less than $1 in his bank account. But still, he never gave up. Now, Arnav is the founder and CEO at Coinbooks, a Web3 startup building an accounting software designed for crypto-native organizations. Arnav has raised $3.2 million from world-class investors like Multicoin Capital and even from the founders of Polygon's Matic network. Coinbooks was also accepted into Y Combinator for the summer 2022 batch. So in this episode, Arnav gets deep, vulnerable, and drops tons of knowledge bombs throughout the episode. So hold on tight while we explore the universe of his mind and life. You're listening to the Inventing the Future podcast with your host, Julian. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Mindflow. And Mindflow is a personal growth-focused social app. So if you're a growth-driven person, check out Mindflow on the App Store to discover and become more of your authentic self and grow alongside your friends. With that, let's dive into the conversation with Arnav. All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode. I have a super special guest with me here, Arnav. Arnav, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
And this is really exciting because Arnav was actually is a listener of the podcast, and I met him through the podcast. So it's a very special moment. And also, on top of that, we're in this studio provided by Founders Inc., F.Inc., and Arnav introduced me to the space. So it's kind of crazy how like one time you're like on one end, and then you kind of get brought to the other end, and that makes it very special. So grateful to be here with you and to have the opportunity to bring you on. There's a lot that's happened since we met like a little over a year ago. So I'm excited to dive in, man.
I'm excited as well. Small world, right?
Small world. Yeah, especially in the entrepreneurial world where
especially in this world.
Yeah, when we're all there's not too many of us trying to like go all out on it, but the dreamers are here. But cool, man. So starting off, Arnav, it'd be great to hear a bit of your background and your early influences. I know you're from northern India, so would love to hear a little bit about your upbringing and the influences that kind of led you to where you are now today.
Yeah, no, totally. So born and raised up north in India. Moved to this amazing high school. It's called UWC. When I was like in 10th grade. That sort of like changed who I am right now and probably like how I probably carry myself. Half the people, funnily, in Silicon Valley are from, I meet are from the high school, which is kind of like crazy to think. So yeah, went to this amazing high school, lived with like people from 80 different countries around the world. Super awesome. And had a lot of fun, built a lot of things, with a lot of amazing, talented folks, and sort of opened me to the power of like diversity and thinking like from different angles and different perspectives, because there were people from 80 different countries around the world talking about different things with different perspectives. And then came to Canada for university. Was extremely disappointed. Needless to say, I was, over the course of this time, even when I was in 9th grade, I remember started building, small just side, call it side projects. But
that's kind of like where you feel it began in many ways.
Yeah, because I think it was more like my mom always used to tell me that she basically got us like computer. I remember when I was like, like 8 or 9, my mom like sold her jewelry and got us like computer.
Wow.
And I remember my mom telling my brother that because he was obsessed with games. And I remember my mom telling my brother that, hey, it's okay being obsessed with games, but remember to make something that others are also obsessed with. And which is like, I don't think in hindsight it actually affected me as a kid. You know, I was 8-year-old. But now that I think about this, it was just like it emerged from that sense.
Wow. She kind of like instilled this creator building mentality.
Yeah. I think it's like there's some like weird in a good way. Some people weird in a good way who like just love the process of like building, regardless of, you know, like what happens. Yeah. It's just like even, and YC has an amazing talk about this. They're like, you know, you would be working on this regardless of the fact that people think that this is not worth working on, and which is why people think contrarian but right is important. Yeah. So yeah, basically moved to Canada, started building. That is when 2.5 years ago, when I legit went on and tried to build like a tech company, like a proper startup. So started off, tested about 13 ideas. All of them failed.
13?
13.
Wow.
All of them failed. Most of them were in B2B. Some of them were in consumer, which you probably saw one of them.
Yeah. I remember 2 of them. One was skillful, like connecting students.
Yeah. It was like a marketplace. Like it was like an app. It was like a marketplace. Never worked. In hindsight, you know, Career Karma is there. So, I mean, it was just like bad execution probably. But yeah, I wasn't, you know, interested in edtech at all. I wasn't interested in consumer in general. I like always loved businesses, and I always loved serving businesses. Hence, I'm like, you know, I feel like I was born to be like a B2B founder. This is what I was meant to do. And, you know, funnily, like you can't really connect dots looking forward, but you can looking back. So, you know, the Steve Jobs saying.
Yeah, I was about to say
the Steve Jobs saying. But yeah, now that I think about this, I'm so glad that failed. Because yeah, you know, you kind of like date these ideas, but you fall in love with the right one.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. But I mean, like 13, that's a lot. I have a question about that, but before that, like I read that like you had this feeling or belief that you were born to be a founder. And I mean, I guess that's very evident now. 13 ideas, didn't care that they failed, still kept going at it. I guess firstly, like where did that belief come from? Why do you feel or think that you were born to be a founder? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I think it was like a series of events. A lot of people say there's like this one moment where they made them think, you know, it was a destiny. I feel like for me, it was like a series of events. As I mentioned, I was born and raised up north in India. I saw my parents as I was like growing up do the same thing over and over and over again. And I was like, if being an adult is like that, I would never want to be an adult. It like scared me. But that's when I like started testing things. I started building stuff. And like fast forward to college when I was actually trying to build businesses, there's a lot that happened over the course of this time. But eventually, the only thing I actually saw myself doing was creating a tech startup. The only thing I could see myself doing. I tried so many things, including, you know, joining other startups, blah, 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 all this stuff. The only thing I literally saw myself doing was building a tech startup. And now that I think about this in hindsight was more like I was born and raised up north in India with, you know, lack of tech in general. And I remember this moment when my mom bought this computer, or I tested Facebook for the first time. I remember listening to like about the Facebook story. You know, a 19-year-old kid in the middle of nowhere just created this software that impacted an 8-year-old kid up north in India.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? That's nuts. And I was like, that's crazy. If he can do this, I gotta try doing this. And also fast forward to after when I started trying to do this, I was like, this is hard as fuck. And when I started to do this, I came to the Valley. And that was hands off the most magical moment in my life. It was like literally 20 years of my life, but I hadn't found home. Yeah. But when I came to the Valley, I was like, oh my God, this is how home feels like.
This is where I was
This is where I was meant to be. And when I saw these YC founders doing amazing stuff, I was like, if you can do this, I know I can do this.
Yeah.
And it was just like falling in love with the process is so important.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Paul Graham also has this amazing essay on determined yet flexible. Because you have to be flexible in terms of changing your dreams like on the go.
Yeah.
Because if you're in love with the idea, you're never gonna, iterate.
Definitely. Yeah. And I mean, you've lived that because you've pivoted like 13 times now. But I guess like, part of your story is that you were in college and you decided to drop out and then buy a one-way ticket here to the Valley, to San Francisco. I'd love if you could like explain your thinking behind that, because it maybe in your mind it seems like an obvious decision, but like, it also consisted of leaving behind like everything you knew in many ways. So what was going through your mind and how did you feel about it, making that sort of bold move and decision?
Yeah, no, totally. Amazing question. So as I mentioned, I came in the Valley. It was, when I first came to the Valley, it wasn't one-way ticket. I came in the Valley and I flew back. Mm-hmm. And I remember viscerally feeling, I was like, oh my God, I just had found home and I left home. I remember feeling so bad about this. I remember I called my brother, I called my parents, and I was like, oh my God, like, I wish immigration wasn't an issue. I wish I could just stay in the Valley, but yet I have to go back. And the status quo, and this is what's interesting about like, life. The thing is like the status quo is, for us, especially like immigrant like situation is like, hey, you go to this college, you get, your visa and stuff, and then you figure out life, and then 10 years down the road, maybe you can dream big. That sucks. Like that sucks. I was like, I don't want to do that. So when I came here, one of my friends from high school, he's building his Series A company now. They've absolutely found product market fit. That thing is a rocket ship. Like he's an amazing person. His name is Keshav. Shout out to him. He's awesome. He's been, with me like since day one. He's building amazing like company. And I was like, I would have never thought that this is possible unless he actually showed the route. And the reason I bring this up is because it's totally correlated to the fact that I like left college. Why? Because after high school, I left for college. He came to the Valley and built a company. And that was after high school. Quite interesting. I looked at him and I was like, this is definitely possible. I came to the Valley, I met YC founders. I was like, okay, like, these are normal people, building amazing stuff. And I met Ruben from Career Karma. Amazing guy, amazing founder, one of the best CEOs I've ever met. I was like, okay, like these are normal people building amazing startups. I went back to college. When I came to the Valley, I went back. I was feeling bad. I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to have zero safety nets. I'm going to go all in, try and test an idea ASAP, and see what I genuinely like fall in love with. AKA like, get some market traction in. Yeah. That's when I started testing a lot of ideas rapidly. Yeah. And I started like basically cutting out ideas after ideas. I missed all my classes. I was in college, quote unquote. Yeah, sure. But I missed all my classes. I was like the weird kid that like, everyone thought is like, okay, what is he doing?
Definitely doing something other than
Definitely doing something other than school.
What's going on here?
What is going on here? I remember that. I remember thinking, I was like, oh my God, is something like wrong with me? I remember like, this is no joke. One day I came back and I was like, oh my God, like what's wrong with me? Which is quite interesting now that I think about this, because, in the Valley, everyone is like that. So anyways, I rapidly started testing ideas. And at one point, I was viscerally feeling this so badly because I had lost my co-founder. It was like a co-founder breakup, lost in the sense that, like, it just gave up and, we had to sort of part ways, and that was like hard. And I remember feeling this viscerally, and I woke up one day and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to move to the Valley. And I had like, that moment I had like just literally money to buy one-way ticket and 1 month of rent. So I bought one-way ticket, 1 month of rent. I came to the Valley with my parents who had no clue what's going to happen. They thought I was in college. And my brother also, like no one knew basically in my family. It was just me and this one-way ticket. And I came here.
Wow. So they didn't know you were leaving until you like
until
to
I
take it.
until I actually raised my seed round, which is quite interesting. But yeah, basically what happened was I bought the ticket. That was like I was literally like on the verge of like losing hope at this point. Luckily, my friend Keshav, who I chatted about previously, running a series of startup, he was always there like supporting me. So I had like someone to jam with. I think if you're a solo founder, you need that community, you need someone. Yeah. But I basically came here, one bit ticket. I remember one night waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding, and I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna eat? It was quite interesting. And then I of course survived on like pitch competitions. They were like pitch competitions and stuff. And I remember also like winning this pitch competition and getting like 5 days of runway. And then winning another one and another some like competition and then getting like 1 week of runway. So it was like literally it was quite interesting. But then over the course of this time, I had no option but to talk to like users.
Yeah.
And that's what like YC, talks about.
Pushes you to do.
It's like, yeah, just like basically go from first principles, because asking the right questions is half the battle. Because you can go to one person, ask a question about social consumer stuff, which you might have in mind. But you can also go to the same customer, go and talk about, HR software, because they work in HR. And you will get a different response and different specs and a different product that you can build. So asking the right question, I feel like, is half the battle, and understanding human motivation is half the battle. So that's how like I started like basically becoming good at product and actually figuring out what people want. And there was a moment when I can talk about how I actually stumbled onto Coinbooks, which is basically a crypto accounting software for companies. And that's just day one, like we're expanding vertically. But like the way that I actually stumbled onto that was by generally talking to customers, asking them to pay, and trying to not fool myself that like this is gonna work. Half the time, like people basically think that, hey, like this is gonna work, this is my idea, and they have like loss aversion, giving it up. But truly, do you think this is like a sustainable thing?
Yeah.
Asking that question was so important and so hard, in some ways also like, hard to give up.
Yeah.
Like certain things. But then, I generated revenue, and then we were good.
I'd love to. So you, as you mentioned, you had 13 different ideas, you pivoted. And I think a fundamental part of that process is validating and invalidating hypothesis, right? And as you said, so much of that is talking with users, as well as like building prototypes maybe as the next step and seeing if it works or not. So I'm curious, like, what does this process look like for you? How do you, like, what sort of questions do you ask? What sort of things do you go through or do in order to validate and invalidate hypothesis, and then come eventually to a decision like, hey, this is going to work, let's double down, or hey, this isn't going to work, I should probably pivot? Like, what is kind of the process, the thinking, the sorts of questions you ask in that journey?
Amazing question. Honestly, I'm like so glad you asked it. Ask this question, because I think honestly in some ways also we're also figuring it out. But one thing that I've learned is I highly recommend, Vanta, for example?
Vanta, not familiar.
Vanta is an amazing company. I highly recommend everyone, like actually if any folks are listening to this and they're interested, checking out Vanta. Amazing founder, amazing company. They do SOC 2 compliance for other startups. So security and compliance for other startups, basically. Getting SOC 2 reports. The way that, I'll give you an example about them and then I'll talk about myself. But the way that they came up with the idea was going super broad in a space, yet narrowing down in a customer. So say, for example, you love social consumer. No. For me, it was B2B. I absolutely knew that like I was born to be a B2B founder. Like it was like since day one, since I was a kid, it was like businesses. I love businesses in general. I love serving businesses, and I don't really like consumer stuff. Like, and it's like for myself, it's like, hey, rational people, rational decisions, and rational stuff. Love businesses. So B2B, that was like one narrow focus. Within B2B, okay, what do I like? Within B2B, do I like fintech? And within fintech, what do I like? Is it, compliance? Is it like, KYC, AML? Like, what is it? And then going as broad as possible, narrowing down an ICP, which is, a customer persona. That's exactly what Vanta did. Vanta does SOC 2 compliance for companies, but the way that they came up with the idea was going with security as a space. They literally went and talked to customer and they chose security as a space. Security is such a massive space. Like you can build 1,000 different products and companies in security. There's so many security companies, right? Yeah. Like there's so many cybersecurity companies, so many cybersecurity like products, tech companies. And I think you can build a lot. But she went massively, the founder, chose a huge space. She narrowed down the customer persona to startup founders. And she talked to just startup founders. And then she picked the problem, the most painful problem that the startup founders were facing, insecurity. And that's exactly, I think, the best way to approach a problem is fix a space, go as broad as possible within a space, but go as narrow as possible with the customer persona.
Interesting.
So massive space, customer persona, which is as narrow as possible, you'll start seeing like patterns among people.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about security. What about security? What within security like bothers you? And you talk to same persona over and over, then you're gonna start hearing, SOC 2 over and over. That's what happens with us. And I was like, I fixed accountants. I fixed, finance and ops people. I fixed like operators basically who are handling back office work for crypto companies. Yeah. And I chatted with them, hundreds of them. And all of them brought up these spreadsheets they were handling for, crypto accounting. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. What can I do there? And that's where we became, I handled it manually and then I basically built the product, the MVP, generated revenue.
Interesting. Yeah, what I love about that is that the broad space kind of gives you like the flexibility to move around a little bit and also have like a general area of interest. But at the end of the day, you're solving a problem for a specific type of person, right? So the core of the building is for a person. And then the more niche you can be about that with a specific persona, the more you're able to better build for that persona. So I guess that's interesting. I guess, well, maybe like one question I have there is like, how do you identify, like if there's a broad space, how do you determine which persona to kind of fixate or focus on? Because there could be a lot of different personas within that. Like what is the thinking behind which one to focus on? Is it like whoever has the biggest pain point or what comes to mind there?
Yeah, no, amazing question. I think that totally is like the founder's call, to be honest. And this is quite interesting because I think about this a lot in terms of, just how to talk to users. There's an amazing book I highly recommend reading everyone. It's called The Mom Test.
The Mom Test.
The Mom Test. Have you read it?
I think I've heard of it, but no, I haven't read it.
It's amazing. Highly recommended. They talk about how to talk to users and find like, not just talk to users. In general, I think you're just like building a company, building a startup is so much of like understanding human motivations, whether it's like users, whether it's investors, employees, and whether it's yourself. In terms of asking customers, I think picking an industry that you think you will absolutely fall in love with, 20 years down the road, you see you doing the same thing over and over, and yet feeling like it's day one. I think that's so important.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, like, picking what you end up doing is so much, there's multiple factors to consider, so many. Right? It's like, how big is the problem? How much do I care about this? What is the potential impact? Right? And like, is this problem growing or declining, right? It may be a big problem, but maybe it's like being solved significantly. Like, how big is the competitive space? There's like a million factors, and you kind of have to find the right alignment. And it's very personal in many ways as well, to what it is for you. So I'm curious. Well, we're going to transition into Coinbooks right now, but actually, like, say really quickly, like in 30 seconds, what Coinbooks is, and then I have a quick follow up to that.
Yeah, no, totally. So Coinbooks, we're basically building the financial infra for crypto.
Yes.
Starting with crypto accounting, and we'll basically move vertically as well.
Yes, great, cool. We'll expand there. One quick question I have there is like, accounting, Excel sheets, taxes aren't like necessarily like the sexiest thing. So one thing I'm curious about is like, is this something you had like a previous interest in, or like was this like an acquired like love or passion for you? How did you even become interested in such a space?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought this up, because one thing I want to like make so clear and I want to like actually talk about is there's a lot of myth outside about what actually, work on something you're so passionate about. There's like a lot of myth about that. The reality about this, and YC has an amazing video. If anyone is curious, YC partners are awesome. One of them is Dalton. The other one is Michael Seibel. They have an amazing video on what is passion, what actually brings passion. And if you search like passion YC on YouTube, it'll show up. The reason I bring this up is because think about this. Where does passion actually come from? For different people, it's different things. For me, it was, and that's exactly the question you want to answer when you're picking an industry. What brings you passion? For me, passion wasn't particularly, it's obviously B2B. That's as huge as it gets. B2B is a huge space. Like, there's like millions of things that you can build. At least I knew I was going to build in B2B. So that was good. But where does passion actually come from? Passion comes from momentum, from the damn thing actually working. It's like users, revenue, numbers. Passion automatically comes if you happen to build a business that's actually working.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the reality about passion. And a lot of people actually get confused about this. It's like, oh, you need to have like 10 years of domain expertise. Now, that's really not true. The reason that a lot of like $1 billion, $100 billion companies are built by people our age, like literally, Stripe founders were 19 when they started Stripe. They knew nothing about payments, right? And a lot of companies, Scale, Brax, like TalkDesk, even Elon when he started, and like hundreds of more. Like I think about this as like Segment, for example, was also one of them. All these companies were started by like 20, 19-year-olds, right? There's a reason behind this. Is because there's something magical, and Vinod Khosla has an amazing, Vinod Khosla by any chance?
Yes.
Vinod Khosla is awesome. He has an amazing saying that first principle thinkers, not domain experts. Because if you're a domain expert, you're in this industry for like so long that you don't even question what is possible with software.
Yeah, you get blindsided by your expertise.
You get blindsided by your expertise. That's so important because the thing is, it's like there's a reason that Stripe had to be built by people who weren't in the banking industry. They would have been so many more quote-unquote domain experts than 19-year-old kids, right?
Yeah.
Yet they came in and they built one of the biggest companies in this entire world. Really, really massive. And that says a lot. And that's a continuous pattern among all the people. Why I bring this up is because thinking about passion, I highly encourage everyone, because I was in this trap of finding passion, and hence was the idea of like ed tech and like skillful and stuff, right? It was so bad. I'm so glad that happened, because that taught me one thing, that where does passion actually comes from is pick a space and find a thing that works. Find a thing that works. Find true product market fit. Find a thing that works. And I'm not saying we have it. Of course not. But at least knowing that passion comes from the thing that's working and being obsessed with finding a thing that works.
Right.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, I think what I've seen is that there's generally two camps of thinking here, or two approaches that I've seen. One is like you have this like very mission-driven person that like, oh, their mom died from cancer, therefore like my whole life is about curing cancer, and then entrepreneurship becomes a means to achieve that end, right? Like if you want to do something at scale, then entrepreneurship is the way, and it's like very like direct exactly where you're going, and the passion is fueled from that sense of mission and purpose. And then the other people, I think, where the camp you're coming from is more so that like, oh, I love entrepreneurship and building and this whole process and journey of experimenting, trying to see what works, failing, etc. And then the passion is more so acquired from the actual journey and growing and seeing users and creating a massive impact, right? So I think like it can come from either way, and either way is fine. And if you can combine both, even better. But yeah, I think it's interesting. And the final thing I'll say on this is that there's also the notion that you explore your curiosities, like, oh, I'm curious about B2B, I'm curious about startup. And the more like curiosities you're able to combine, that aggregates into a passion of sorts. And it's also like, you may not like or love something or be passionate about it until you become good at it, right? I felt this at least for like coding, for example. Like I was curious about tech, curious about having this technical expertise. In the beginning, I sucked, and I was like, fuck this, man. Like, I'm dealing with stupid bugs all day and it's not working and it's annoying. But now I got better at it and it's actually way funner. So some things I think, like, I would suggest from my perspective, follow curiosity, and passion can come as a result of that. And what you love and the obsessions you develop may come later. So if it's not there initially, like, maybe there could be a little more openness to exploration and seeing that. But I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, totally. I 100% agree. I think I highly recommend like everyone reading this essay by like Paul Graham. It's about determination and flexibility. There's a reason he brings this up is, and there's a reason YC started by funding college kids. A lot of people forget this. I think it's like YC started by funding college kids. The reason, people like funding young founders is because they're inexperienced, yet they're first principle thinkers. They're like, okay, doing a normal person would think it is crazy. Yeah. And a lot of people also forget that billion-dollar companies and massive companies actually not only like can be built by younger people, but most oftenly actually built by young people. It's really, really important. And basically finding that passion for yourself that, hey, what are you meant to do? Like, do you think you were meant to build a company? What is your plan B? Do you have a plan B? Because if you do, then definitely you're not meant to build a company. That's my personal take. Yeah. Is just if you have a plan B, if you have a safety net, you cannot build a startup.
Gotta burn your boats.
I think that's so important. I think it was like, I remember basically, because I remember my brother called me and stuff, and he was like, "You're crazy. Like this cannot be done." And the reality is, I think you gotta be crazy.
Yeah.
You just have to. And because like outsized things only happen if you don't do normal stuff.
No doubt.
That makes sense. Like,
I mean, the thing is, like, if you weren't, you need a level of craziness to achieve whatever like you want to set out. If not, everyone else would like go out and try to do that, and it wouldn't be that crazy. What makes it crazy is the fact that no one else is like thinks it's possible or is bold enough to try to
like
do
Stripe. I love the example of Stripe. I'm such a big fan of like Stripe as a company because it's so magical how it started. Because there was these two kids, and I remember like there's this talk by Patrick Colson. He talks about how like they came up, with Stripe as an idea. They obviously faced this problem, and these are two kids, right? They know nothing about the financial industry before they started. Now they're experts, of course. You become expert on the job, and that's also one thing to note, that you become a domain expert on the job when you start a company. That's so important to know. Like, I know everything about accounting now. So, like, everything. So you become a domain expert on the job. But all that to say is, super interesting thing about Stripe is they came up with this idea, and their reaction was, I remembered one of the talks that Patrick Colson was giving, the reaction of his brother, John, was, yeah, let's build it how hard it could be. That's crazy. That's amazing. And because building an API company is the hardest company you could build, especially Stripe with so many regulations. I mean, turns out it was really hard. It took them 2 years to just like take the product into the market. And if they weren't this naive, they would have never tried, right?
Yeah.
If they were domain experts, they would have never tried, because that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
You gotta love. There should be something. I think that's why I think even being an immigrant is so helpful for myself, and it helped me in this journey. And I think it was like a series of events that, actually makes people the way they are. For example, seeing my parents do the same thing over and over. And hence I was attracted to startups in general. Because every day there's some shit that goes down, right? There's like something that's going to happen, and you just never can prep for it. There will never be a day that'll be similar to the previous day. And that is so exciting. People don't get that. Building a startup is really hard, but if you're the type of person broken in the way that like you want to live a life of, like Jeff Bezos has this like saying, do you want to live a life of service and adventure, or do you want to live a life of ease and comfort? And in a way, being an immigrant with like, every day being, a life of adventure, I think sort of helped. Because I I kind of like don't want to live a life of ease and comfort.
Yeah.
There's no point. It's not fun. And because my parents did that, and I saw them go over like the same thing over and over, and I was like, that's really boring.
Yeah.
I want to do something. And I saw on the flip side, also saw this tech changing my life. A random kid up north in India. And that gave me the opportunity to go to this high school that I never thought I would go to, and exposed me to a diverse group of people. And that's crazy. That happened because of tech. And there's a series of events that if you can make this much impact on this random person in the middle of nowhere through tech, aka myself, you can do anything. And you can, basically, if you can make this much of an impact, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what I was born to do. This is exactly what I want to do with my life. And you just figure that out on the go as well as you do it. You test out a lot of things. And then you realize over the course of this testing things as well, you realize how bad you want it. There's 90% like failure rate in startups, but people also don't realize that 90% failure rate comes with people giving up the first time. First time never works. Like, let's be honest, right? First time is just like you're getting good at product. You're getting good at like everything. You're learning things on the job. You're getting good with rejection. You're getting the reps in. You're like getting used to rejection, basically. Rejection from users, employees, whatever it might be. But then you become good. And you just start loving the process. And it feels like play. And I think that's really, really critical. And I've seen a lot of people burn out as well.
Yeah.
A lot. People who built like $1 billion companies, like $4 billion company, $2 billion companies, and the guy's burnt out. I met him recently. But I think there's like certain set of people who just like want only this with their life.
Yeah. This is their way of living.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely not for everyone, but yeah, if you want to live a life of adventure and adversity and hardship, it's kind of weird that you would think like, why would anyone intentionally go towards something difficult or challenging or hard? But inherently within the harder something is, the more you can grow, and the harder it is, the more interesting it is. And as you said, I don't think I'd thought about this, but it's very obvious in retrospect that the harder something is, the less redundant your life is, because there's always going to be like an endless amount of new and interesting challenges that come up. And yes, it's like, fuck, there's problems, there's challenges, like how the hell am I going to solve this? But that's like that creates friction, maybe a little bit of stress, but that's how you grow. And two, that just makes it so much more interesting, especially if you have the mindset to perceive those problems as opportunities for growth, as opportunities for impact, and even business opportunities for you to gain financial wealth. So I think so much of like the stress and whether you feel good or bad about the hardship depends on the mindset you go into it with. Yeah,
no, totally. I think like, again, I would bring up, YC's video again, because it's actually really valuable about passion. I would ask like if there's anyone actually debating and in a position that, what they should do. I remember asking myself, if not this, then what?
Yeah.
Right? And if you can't answer that, you should probably keep on doing what you love doing.
Yeah.
And I remember I tried a lot of things, right? I remember I got fired from my internship and stuff. And I knew at that point, oh my God, like I was like, I'm meant to start my own company. Like, literally.
Like, thank you for firing me. Now I know for sure I'm supposed to be a founder.
Dude, it was hilarious because I got more users than my employer, but it was just quite interesting on the job. That's why I got fired. But yeah, basically it was quite interesting because all these series of events I think if you want to know yourself as a person, start a company. You get to know yourself so much. Yeah. I'm not even kidding. You get to know how bad you want something, how far you're willing to go to get something, and what type of person you are. And the type of person, who is flexible enough, a type of because there's like so many different ways to start a company, right?
Yeah.
So many ways. As you mentioned, there's someone who with a vision, someone who faced the problem themselves, like Airbnbs faced this problem themselves. Hence, they were okay failing for 2 years on the same idea and they didn't pivot. Versus like, a lot of people I come up with Segment, for example, Segment was started as a classroom lecture tool. They pivoted like continuously for like 2 years. And then they figured out Segment, which is now a customer data platform, right? So it's like a totally different pivot. So there's like a lot of ways companies can be started. There's no one like solid path. And us as humans are wired to think in a way that, every question has an answer.
Yeah.
Because that's how we're like born and raised. That every question has an answer. But the tricky part about startups is no one has the answer. I remember joining YC and thinking that YC partners will have answers to your questions, right? But the reality is no one in this entire world will help you build a company. You have to build it yourself.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge. That's why building a company is really hard.
Yeah. And that's why, like,
because you're alone.
You also, like, the fact that you're building something means that to solve a problem means that someone hasn't solved that problem. So people literally cannot have the answers because literally the problem has not been solved. They could give you ideas, they could give you suggestions and perspectives, but also like the only person that is as invested or knows as much about the problem space is you. No doubt, like partners and other people like have a lot of experience and can give you ideas and orientation. But I think a lot of it is knowing what to listen to, what not, how that guides you. But at the end of the day, you're the one holding the baton and executing and building, and that's where the magic happens.
Dude, that's where the magic happens. And I remember actually the most important, like these are so many inflection points. Like just living in the valley teaches you so much. And I highly recommend if anyone is here like listening and thinking about, starting something, come to the valley.
Yeah.
It's magical. Meet other founders. Super critical. But also like spend time with yourself thinking a lot. I think that just like alone in itself helps a lot. Why I say that is because I remember us as humans are just like wired to look for solutions and think that there's a certain, like there's a path someone craved that basically a step-by-step guide that you can follow to achieve something. Because every question has an answer, right? That's how we are born and raised. That's how we were raised as kids. That's how we were raised in school. Every question has an answer and everyone agrees to that answer, right? Hence, being contrarian is not that common.
Yeah.
And that's what's like really, really tricky about startups is you got to unlearn all that stuff, all that bullshit in our mind. I think that's like so critical. And that's why I don't like, that's why I'm a dropout. That's why I hated university. Is I think that just teaches you the wrong things. A lot of places it just teaches you the wrong things. And especially in terms of this contrarian view. Have you read 0 to 1, the book?
Yes. Yeah,
amazing book, right? So they talk about like being contrarian, the importance of being contrarian.
Yeah, Peter Thiel is like the most contrarian person.
Yeah, no, I mean like the reason behind this is research by definition means you will come up with the things that everyone agrees on. Hence, you can't innovate. If you're innovating, you can't research. You can't Google. Hence, YC says there's only 2 things you should be doing if you want to build a tech company. If you're building a startup, you should be writing code or talking to users. Nothing else, right? And it's like writing code, talking to users. God forbid if you do anything else, you're wasting time. And that's so true. Unless I applied this like actually in action, you have to know that's so true. And that's how you got to train your team. That's what like I'm inducing in like our team and stuff as well. Is anything else we do is bullshit. Because the reality about that is if we are not talking to users, by definition, we are not learning things that we only know. We got to have secrets, man. We got to have insights.
I mean, talking to users is the key to validating and invalidating hypotheses. And if you don't do
and
that, then
insights.
You're just like building in the dark. And that's the last thing you want to do.
Exactly. And the thing is, the reality about like, what contrarian actually means? Like it wasn't actionable for me. When I heard like, be contrarian stuff, what does that mean? It's not actionable. But it truly, I think personally, at least this is what I think it means. I might not be correct, totally like just taking it from a grain of salt. But what I think it means is actually going and in practice, especially in startups, just in startups. I think what it actually in practice means is going and talking to your customers, talking to your users, figuring out the problems and insights that no one has figured out, that no one else knows. Figure out the pain point. Figure out some insight that you got that no one else has. And then the only way, by definition, by the way, the only way you can get an insight that no one else knows is by talking to customers.
Yeah.
How else? If you Google it, that means everyone knows it. There's only two ways you can find an information, right? You talk to people or you Google it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've heard someone say that, like, there's way more knowledge buried inside people's heads than there is in books, right? There's a lot of books, right? Thousands, millions of books. There's so much knowledge, but the amount of knowledge in people's heads relative to the amount of knowledge in like books or videos is just astronomical.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Because again, like coming to the thing about, writing code or talking to users, the only way you can get insights is by asking the right questions to your customers.
Yeah. How do you ask the right questions? Like, is there a resource you would recommend or an insight or philosophy that you think is good? Like, what do you think are the general principles to asking good questions to users?
Yeah, no, amazing question. I think firstly, like in terms of books and stuff, I would say like the MOM test is awesome. It just helps you think from first principles, helps you ask like, really like broad questions. And as I gave you an example of Vanta, the founder of Vanta went with security as a space and she narrowed down a customer persona, but then she asked about security only. That was really good because she narrowed down a space. She asked about security only as a startup founder, and her persona was startup founders, right? She could have asked a million other things. She could have asked problems about hiring. That's a totally different product. She could have asked problems in security. That's a totally different problem. She could have asked problems in, fundraising. That's a totally different product. And these are different problems, different products. Hence the importance of asking asking the right questions in the right space. And the reality about picking the right space is it has to be your hunch as a founder.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's nothing wrong with picking the wrong space first and then pivoting away and then finding out the right space and then asking the same different questions to the same people.
Yeah, because it's a combination of like using your intuition to guide your initial direction, but then probably more importantly is being able to know whether your intuition is correct or not based on validating and invalidating the hypothesis around that intuition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you gotta go with like a space. Be as broad as possible. Don't go with assumptions. You might have some hunch about the solution. That's totally fine. But don't bring up your solution. Ask the right questions to these people. And ask about the space. What are your hair and fire problems? What are your like most hair and fire problems? How much would you pay for it if you come up with a solution after listening to all the problems? But let them blabber about the problems and pick the right space. If you think after talking to 10 people you picked the wrong space, totally fine. Go back. Pick another space, go talk to the same people. You develop that relationship. And once the time actually comes, once you do see that someone is pulling this out of you, you go and sell this product to them. It becomes like this process. I think this habit of getting into like this mode of just zooming out, picking a space, asking problems, coming up with solutions, and doing that over and over again is so critical. And that translates to writing code, talking to users. That's exactly what that means, right?
Yeah.
Picking a space, listening to customers, building a solution, going to them. Picking a space, talking to customers, building a solution, going to them. And do that over and over. That's writing code, talking to users.
Build, measure, learn.
Build, measure, learn. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Love that. Okay, cool. So we derailed a little bit from Coinbooks, but that was a beautiful derail. So let's go back a little bit, and I'd love to just briefly hear like how you would describe the problem space of Coinbooks and how you're aiming to solve the problem there.
Yeah, no, amazing question. So just a quick TLDR. A lot of companies that have crypto on their balance sheet right now don't have a way for them to account for those transactions on the balance sheet. As a company, you have to account for every transaction and file taxes for them, because an expense can be payroll expense, can be something else, and then you have to handle reconciliation for those transactions, and then you have to file taxes for them. And for a crypto company, handling those transactions on the blockchain per se is really hard. And right now it was being done on Google Sheets, on spreadsheets. We come in, we provide you proper accounting software, and that works with your existing accounting software. And there you go. You can handle all your accounting, your taxes, everything.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah. The way you put it, the QuickBooks for
crypto.
That's beautiful. And what do you think is like the longer term vision here? Like what could this become? Like maybe like today's the QuickBooks for crypto. What do you think Coinbooks could become long term? What do you want to become long term?
Amazing question. This is what I love answering. Because the reality is we don't want to be just an accounting software, right? The way that I see this market as well in general is I personally know all the B2B products that exist in I wouldn't say all of them. I know a lot of B2B products that exist in the market. And because I'm a B2B founder, right? Like I did built a lot of B2B products since the past 2-3 years. Maybe, that helped a lot. I bet it did. Once you see all those products and once you see how existing companies are using them, you try and think in a way that okay, there are companies with crypto on the balance sheet that might face XYZ problem. And now we have a customer base. We have, a lot of customers now. We have one of the biggest ones in, crypto, like Magic Eden using us. Accounting is just day one. Why? Because have you heard about Intuit?
Yes, for sure.
Intuit, yeah. So basically Intuit is a multi-product company that provides accounting, taxes, payroll, everything in between. That's what we want to do. So we want to be the financial back office. So everything related to, if a crypto company comes in, everything related to a crypto company and the financial back office is handled by Coinbooks.
Yeah.
Start with accounting, taxes, payroll, invoicing, everything in between, and even more.
Yeah. The core is to enable these companies to do more with less.
And be the financial back office, basically. Everywhere where a CFO goes, financial and ops person go, COO goes, accountant goes, Coinbooks is there, main source of truth.
That's beautiful. Great way to describe it. Yeah. And what would you say has been in the process of either building, fundraising, or your journey with Coinbooks? What are one of the biggest challenging moments or mistakes you've made throughout your journey?
Oh, that's an interesting question because I think about this and I'm like, what challenges have I not faced? Right. But let me think about this. I think the most important was, I'll tell you just the most important that I think was critical for me was just gathering a team around me that's actually 10x better than me. That's so important.
How'd you do that?
That was there's I think for getting a team around you which is 10x better than you, there's no central formula for it. It's just you gotta attract the type of people you would love working with, yet they're smarter than you. And the way to do that is basically just absolutely generally talking to people who act like you, who work like you, same work ethic, and yet in terms of skills they're really good at better at things than you. So I'll give you an example for us, our founding team. We're just tiny 4-people team, including me. And it took me 7 months to find our founding team. Wow. 3 people. 7 months to hire 3 people. That's really, really hard. And that included, thousands of interviews, literally thousands of interviews, and, hundreds and hundreds of going through repos, LinkedIn profiles, getting, intros, Discord messages, all that good stuff.
Are you technical, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that's also interesting because you become on job, but I need to find 10x better engineers than myself.
Right. Yeah. Because you need to be able to gauge that talent as well.
Exactly.
That's why I asked.
And that honestly, I think that's I think that was really important, and that actually did help a lot because I can easily finding an amazing engineer for me is so easy, but finding the founding team is hard for everyone. And there's a difference between the same.
Yeah. What is it?
That's really, really important. I want to point this out because we found amazing engineers that we had to let go. And they were amazing, right? They were awesome, but they were great engineers, not great founding teams. And by that, I mean anything other than writing code would not be fun for them. The type of people I think you need at this stage is people who love startups.
Yeah.
They happen to be an amazing engineer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They happen to be an amazing engineer, yet they absolutely just love startups.
Yeah.
They love building a company first, and they happen to be an amazing engineer. So, on a day-to-day basis, if you need to, by chance, you talk to users, handle support, do growth, you would be okay doing that. And you would love doing that. Not be okay doing that, you would love doing that. And you would love doing everything, basically. AKA writing code, talking to users. You shouldn't be hating the talking to users part. Because talking to users is the one that gives you all the insights. And that's why it's like finding that team was really hard. Because you have to find this middle ground where you're an amazing engineer, yet you happen to love, basically building startups.
Yeah.
And you love it so much that you're willing to do anything to make the startup successful. And if that happens to be engineering, that's totally fine. I can do that. If that happened to be, talking to users, I can do that too. I did that all the time alone before I had the team, right? It's like, and I basically did that. I even remember, note that writing code also requires, getting in flow a lot. And I remember being in the shoes where I had 50 cents and I was writing code. And imagine when you have this, you're like literally, you have like this massive burden on your head and you're like trying to get in flow. Yeah. I remember like opening like VS Code and I was like, oh my God, I gotta make every line of code count. Every line of code should generate revenue. And I think that's so important.
Wow.
And I think I'm so glad that event happened and that experience was, I had that experience because that's exactly how a startup should be ran. Every line of code should increase revenue, at least for B2B companies or your KPI. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the type of people you look into. And that's the most powerful thing. Once you do have a team you can trust blindly, is so critical.
Yeah.
It's so important that you have that team. And that's why I'm finding the founding team makes or breaks the company. It's literally as simple as that. It's like founding team is going to make or break the company. Hands off. And yeah, it's basically whatever it takes to make the startup successful, whether it's writing code or talking to users, you just got to do both. And the founding team needs to know what to do. Needs to know to do both.
Do you think engineers should also talk to users?
Oh, 100%, dude. The reality about this is our product got so good in small amount of time. Why? Because everyone was doing support and everyone is an engineer. So I basically talk to a user, I find this bug and I'm like, hey, let me just fix it. I fix it, totally fine. No one even heard about it. I got it covered. And that's the mentality you induce with the team. If you're like this, your team is going to be like this.
Yeah.
It starts from the top, right? I was like this. Everyone sees the determination and you generally are like this, right? It's not like you actually have to be like this. To find people like this, you gotta be yourself. Amazing. It's in the sense that you are actually doing things that hey, if you're gonna be, everyone's gonna be doing support, everyone's gonna be doing support. Everyone's gonna be fixing bugs, everyone's gonna be fixing bugs.
Yeah.
And there's no basically just there is delegation in the sense that, hey, someone else built a spec, so they should probably work on, they have more context on it, so they can handle it. But there's no hey, you should do that because XYZ. No. There's blind trust. And that's magical. It's that is where magic happens. It's it's not hey, you should do this. It's hey, don't worry about it. I got it.
Yeah.
Everyone is yeah, don't worry about it. I got it. And that's the attitude you want. It's hey, I got this. No worries.
Yeah. I think when that happens, you have developed such a high level of care with everyone on the team, or that each individual cares so much that they don't need to be told what to do. They know what needs to be done and they go and do it. And to your point, I think that can only really happen if each team member is fully integrated into everything that's happening. And that's why one of the biggest differences between a bigger company and a small startup, that there's way more flexibility, way more hats to wear. And in that respect, it's more important because the more cohesive of a unit you are and the more well integrated everyone is, the faster you can move together. And things I'll take that on even though someone didn't delegate it to me, those sort of things start to happen.
That's why YC loves funding eng teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason behind this, and I absolutely love this, and I resonate with this because the reality is, like, if you're good at product, like, that does matter a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, getting good at product doesn't mean you're a good engineer, but it does go hand in hand. So, the reason YC loves funding edge teams as well, and I absolutely love it, and I absolutely resonate with it, is because, oh my God, in practice, if you put this, everyone's doing support and everyone is an edge, product gets 10x better. Rippling has an amazing video on this, actually. For longest time, for like 2 years, I think, I'm not sure, Rippling's entire edge team was doing support. They had no support people.
Wow.
Yeah, they had like 20 people edge team, stuff like that, and everyone was doing support. That's amazing. That's beautiful. I think that's so important, like in the early days. Yeah. And because our entire team is eng, because everyone in the team is an engineer and everyone can, do everything, our product gets better like really fast. Yeah. And that's something magical, because the reality is, like, then it becomes like you're like blind trusted with the team members, and you're like, everyone has an attitude of, hey, I got this, don't worry. Hey, I got this, don't worry. You go talk to users. I got this, don't worry. I'll talk to this user. Hey, you got this? I'm talking to your user. No worries. So it's like this blind trust that it becomes so fun.
Yeah.
Of like actually making sure that every line of code increases revenue. And the only thing that matters is this KPI. And the only way to increase this KPI is writing code or talking to users. Yeah. Nothing else, right? Nothing else will actually make a business. It's like writing code, talking to users, you build a product, better product or service. You serve those customers by talking to them, and then you increase revenue, which is the KPI. So the only way to increase that is make every line of code count. Yeah. And because if your team is an eng heavy team, that makes such a big difference, man. I think that's the reason a lot of companies are actually built by like, really technical heavy teams. And that's why YC prefers them. Is because if you're good at product, I mean, I guess, you can be good at product, and especially B2B, you can be good at product and figure it out and hire better people. But if you're good at product and you're good eng and you know how to talk to users, oh my God.
Boom.
That's gold.
You're dangerous.
You're dangerous. And I see that in YC all the time, man. I see people come in with like bad ideas, yet they're so good at talking to users and they're so good at building the product. They're amazing. They can do anything.
Yeah. I mean, if you have all three, that's dangerous. But if not, you have to be like really freaking good.
You gotta just get dangerous with like everything. I think it's like founders in general, I think, have to be generalists.
Yeah.
Right. I'm an all-right engineer. Right. Mm-hmm. I just also have to make sure that I hire 10x better ones. Yeah. And they can talk to users and they're good at support. So if you're a founder and you hired someone who is not better than you, then you made a mistake, right? That's the whole job. That's the whole job. Yeah. Founder should be like the least smartest person in the room.
I think so much of the importance in having those expertises, like the technical ones, is just in one, being able to judge talent, and two, being able to better relate and resonate and understand and empathize.
So important. Because you can, even with our sprints, like when we plan our sprints, you just like, you can empathize with your team. Yeah. A lot. Yeah. You can trust your team blindly. You can provide them with the right resources. And when the time comes, they can get the same insights, because eventually, founding team also has to, delegate down and down. So it's like once the time comes to hire another person, they can eventually do the same with the next group, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the whole goal of hiring this one person, if there's like one founder and they hire one person, the whole goal is for that person is to hire, for these two people is to hire the third person who is 10x better than these two people. Yep. And keep on basically getting more and more better and better talent.
And it's so important because A players only want to play with A players. So if you hire a B player in the very beginning, or even a C player, it's like, ooh,
it's bad.
It's hard. There's this great quote I heard from someone once that said that in the beginning, like if you're like a big or company or mid-sized company, anyone you hire influences the culture. But in the beginning, the people that you hire become the culture. So it's a big difference between what it becomes and how it gets influenced later on.
Yeah. And the reality about this is, actually, to be honest, the genuine reality about this is it starts for founders. Like founders, I think founders have to generally just like care a lot and be determined, be flexible, and that all resonates with people that you hire. And even with this, like especially there's something magical that happened with like the founding team, especially the early founding team. You get to know each other so much. You get to know yourself so much because you're going through all this. You're like literally pushing the boulder up the hill, right?
Yeah.
And there's something magical that happens here. If you created a workplace where everyone is smart, feels like they're smarter than the other person is smarter than them at XYZ places, and they're challenged, and yet they feel important and they're bringing so much value in the company.
It's the perfect mix.
It's the perfect mix. Everyone will love coming there. Everyone loves feeling challenged. Everyone loves feeling like they can trust, their teammates. And, even if over the course of this time you're kind of failing, you love working with these people. And for example, Furkan, right? Furkan built like, I think Bebo with the same founding team as he got in Third Web.
Wow.
Yeah, because the thing is, the reality is also that founding teams tend to then stick together.
Yeah.
Always. And that's like, building that type of team is so important.
Yeah.
Like that's half the
chemistry.
job. And that's half the job. And of course, once you have that team, it's just, hey.
Boom. Can you do it? Cool. I want to ask the last few questions before we close, Arnav. And one that comes to mind is, you brought this up earlier in the interview. You said that, like, as a founder, like entrepreneurship, what's so valuable about it is who you become and who you discover who you become. And you also mentioned you also need to like go and think for yourself and like, I don't know what sort of thinking you do. That's kind of like the notion of the question. But like, I guess my question is, who have you become in the process of becoming a founder and doing this thing? Like, what have you discovered about yourself? Has it changed who you are and the vision of who you want to become?
That's an amazing question. I think I find out about myself like a lot on a day-to-day basis, but as you go. But that being said, there's like certain things I think is just like never gonna change. It's just, and this also relates to how I was born and raised. The way that I was born and raised is, if I want something, if I want X, I'm not stopping until I get X.
Relentlessness.
Yeah. I think I didn't know I was like that until like I had 50 cents in my bank account. I think that's when you figured out that like how you want this, but how bad you want this.
Yeah.
Right. YC just ended their, batch recently, and they had an amazing chat about this. And this was like closing thoughts for our summer 22 batch. And the thing that they mentioned was basically being determined, the importance of being determined. And I bring this up over and over is because these are few patterns I think are so important just when you're on this journey. Because there's so many ways you can just give up, right?
Yeah. It's the easiest thing to do.
It's the easiest thing to do. And you have to be working on something because of some inner purpose. I mean, if your purpose is to create, like make money or like get famous, all this stuff.
The extrinsic.
Yeah, the extrinsic. I don't think that's like, I think you'll give up. There's so many ways to make money or get famous. There needs to be something like really deep.
Yeah.
Like deeply, you have to be kind of like weird in a good way. Or bad way, like it can get unhealthy. And you need to be okay with that. I think you need to be okay with living a lifestyle that might be considered really weird. And can you be the type of person who is weird among weirdos? who thinks big among big thinkers, right? I think that's so important. And even coming to the Valley, I just found out that, you come into the Valley and you're like, yeah, this is awesome, this is great. But even coming to the Valley is just, I've also found out for myself is just, there's so much stuff that you have to do differently. Yeah. Like outsized results, can only be produced by doing things differently. And that's what was YC's message towards the end, which was quite interesting. And I think that that was just struck out so much. And I think about this deeply. I don't know what the conclusion is. I just think about this deeply. But Dalton, one of the partners, an amazing partner. I highly recommend everyone checking his videos out. But he talked about, different things. If you're shooting for different things, it can be in any domain. It can be in music. It can be, in acting, whatever you might be doing, whatever you love doing. That's important. Whatever you love doing. Different results only come if you do different things. If you do uncommon stuff. Coming to the valley feels like, you are doing uncommon stuff from the outside, but also in the valley, you got to do different stuff from from other people in the valley.
Contrarians only.
Contrarians only. But yeah, that's a deep think about this deeply, because I tend to go on autopilot and tend to basically just like any other human, try and find solutions in an easy way. But the reality is I just have to find my own way. And that was the biggest lesson I think I learned from YC is no one can get you the answer. I think that's the type of person I actually became after coming to the valley, going through YC and that's the biggest lesson. And I hope more people also understand this is you are alone when you're building a startup. Yet you have your team, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You are with a team to, build this company, but getting to the right answers is on you. It's so important to know that no one in this entire world will get you to the right answer. Because if they did, they would have built this company themselves, right? That's the reality. And if you're building something new, if you're building tech in general, not just company, any product that never existed before, any innovative stuff, any music that never existed before, it has to come from you. You as a person, you finding some answer no one else found, some insights no one else found.
That sort of thing. So this is interesting because you're speaking of the notion of this is a lonely journey, and you're also a solo founder. So
Yep.
you probably feel that much more deeply. It seems like you have a great mindset of it now, but what would you say to the founder, it could be a solo founder or not, that does feel lonely in their journey? How did they deal with that? How do they navigate through that feeling of loneliness?
Yeah, no, amazing question. I think, of course, I can give you the generic answer, which is actually honestly true as well. That surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people who are the 30% rule. I don't know if you heard about this, but 30% rule is 30% of the people you actually, who are one step behind you, help them. 30% of the people who are at the same stage as you, learn from them and work with them. 30% of the people who are 10 steps ahead of you, learn from them. That's so important. And you basically keep this holistic view, which is important, which is great.
And the 10%?
Bad math. 33% maybe then.
Okay.
The 33% rule maybe. But basically it's surround yourself with those type of people. That's important. Of course, surround yourself with other people going through the same stuff because you can chat about this with them. But I think the most important thing that I think is not talked about a lot is actually get okay living with yourself, living and spending time with you as a human. I think that was hard for me because I'm a really social person and stuff, right? and I generally I was even in high school I used to surround myself with friends 24/7. But honestly, I just realized the importance of just being with myself. Especially when you go through so many ups and downs and you move from one country to the other with a one-way ticket and you have no one that you know. There's no other way, but you suddenly realize the importance of actually just being with yourself. And you get to know yourself as a person, as a human. You get to think from first principles because us as humans tend to be in autopilot. Either surround ourselves with other humans, and think about, whatever we were talking about, or surround ourselves with, our co-founders. And we don't get enough time to actually think from first principles then. Because we are surrounding ourselves with other humans over and over all the time.
That's a great point.
We don't think from first principles because of that. I just it was really counterintuitive to think about that, but I think that's so critical. Surrounding yourself with yourself is also so important. Just spend time with yourself. What do you want to do, right? How do you want to approach this XYZ position? And that just helped me a lot when questions like pivot or iterate comes up. When questions about, how bad you want this comes up. When questions about what do you want to do, you're questioning everything, right? And what do you want to do next comes up, is this being with myself? And you need to be okay with that. I think there's a saying. Also, I read it somewhere. Elon Musk has the saying. I'm not sure, that once you do surround your just be with yourself, it becomes addictive. But it becomes addictive to just be with yourself, and that becomes your happy place then. And in the sense that you are okay with this balance of being with yourself, yet being with your amazing team. Because, without team, you can't do anything.
Yeah. Interesting. I love that. I think it's a very powerful lesson, and one that I actually realized to an extent when I did a silent retreat. I did a 5-day experience where I went out into the woods, no tech, no humans, just me, myself, and I, and some journals and nature.
Nice.
And what's interesting is that, firstly, the powerful thing about it is that you're creating space, and one, you're creating space for yourself, and two, you're drowning out the noise. Because when you're with other people, it's great. You can synergize, relate. It's fun, get different ideas, perspectives. But there's also noise. It's external to you. Yeah. And so you're not taking the time to listen deeply within, unless you're exploring yourself deeply within with someone else, which could be fine as well. Yeah. But I think you almost I guess when I did that silent retreat, the powerful thing about it was that when I disconnected with the world, I reconnected with a deeper part of myself. And that usually doesn't happen in this world full of noise and reactions and vibrations and all of these things. So I think just creating that space is where, like you said, these questions so naturally come up.
There's an amazing also video on just how to come up with ideas in general. I think it is actually by YC. I'm advertising YC too much, but I do love
high probability.
High probability. But there's an amazing video by YC about how to come up with ideas. And one of the things that they actually talk about, which is quite interesting, and I think they generally thought about this deeply, was sometimes there are certain thoughts that you think about, but they don't even bubble up to your conscious mind. If that makes sense. These are unconscious thoughts that, don't even bubble up to your mind because you're not having enough interaction with yourself.
Yeah.
You're not sitting down. That's why doing meditation for a lot of people is uncomfortable. A lot of people do feel uncomfortable doing meditation, right? Because coming up with these thoughts are just and just being with yourself in general, us as humans are social animals. And the concept of being with yourself is considered quote unquote lonely, right? And it's negative. But there's an amazing, I bring this talk up is because there are certain thoughts that your unconscious mind doesn't even bubble up to your conscious mind, and you don't think about them because your conscious mind just rejects those thoughts. Those might be contrarian ideas, those might be something else. But the reason that most of the time that happens is because you suddenly surround yourself with another human that brings up another thought, and that conscious thought just suppresses. If that makes sense. And that's really, I thought about that really deeply because I think that was the moment when I was oh my God, I should just stay in tonight. I should surround myself with myself for a bit. I should keep some time with myself. And I think honestly that also, these events also led me to become a solo founder.
Wow.
Some people are are actually meant to be solo founders. And yeah, I think I can't relate that to, someone who has a co-founder. I think this might be applicable to them, 'cause I don't have one. But I can certainly talk for like myself that, this like generally actually helped me that, hey, being with myself is actually really important. It's just those thoughts that don't really like bubble up to your conscious mind actually does like bubble up to your conscious mind. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yeah, spend some time with yourself today. You never know what might come up. Things will resurface and you'll explore deeper parts of yourself. But cool. Arnav, last question for you.
Yeah.
So what role do you want to play in the invention of the future? How will you invent the future?
Interesting question. I think I will. I think I will always, like, of course, I'll give you two answers. Number one is, I know I was born to be a founder. This is what I was put on earth to do, right? This is like one thing I rested my mind with when I had like 50 cents in my bank account was this or nothing else. Like, Will Smith has an amazing saying that if we get on a treadmill, either you're getting off or I'm going to die. Because the reality is some people, there's like no option for them. Like this is exactly what they were meant to do. And that's one answer I can give you, that of course, I was always born to be a founder. This is building a company was never an option, was never a choice. It was what I was put on earth to do. That's number one. And number two, like in terms of just being part of the future, I love creating innovative tech. That's what affected me as a kid, and that's how I actually started writing code. That's what affected me as a kid up north in India. 10 years down the road, I will still be creating products people want. And that will always be in the form of a company. Because I think the only way you can actually make outsized impact is by building a company. By bringing together people, creating outsized results, because you can't do anything alone, of course not. By bringing together amazing people to bring amazing things into reality, and think of a world without Tesla, right? People shit on these cars a lot, but like, think of a world without Tesla. Think of a world
created a revolution.
Think of a world without like, whatever, like for me it's superhuman, but it's like, think of a world without superhumans. Think of a world without VS Code. Think of a world without JS. Crazy. I just like, that's exactly what I want to do. It's like 10 years down the road, you create something that 10 years down the road people say that imagine a world without X. And X was brought in reality by, these group of people. Yeah. And that's the type of like role I want to play in like the world in general. Make something so impactful that it genuinely deeply brings joy. Like products that bring joy to people's life, make a massive impact, are rare. And that's what I want to do. So, yeah.
An impact that echoes throughout eternity.
Forever. Like Airbnb, right?
Yes.
It's like, it stays, you don't want to outlive your child. That's the reality.
Yeah.
You never want to outlive your child. And if that happened to be a company for you, good.
Yeah. It's beautiful. So, Arnav, well, firstly, if you're a crypto company, check out Coinbooks. It'll save you a lot of time.
Yeah.
But also, where can people follow along your journey?
Yeah, honestly, you can follow me on Twitter. That's probably you can find me. Rest, I don't use social that much, but yeah. Twitter, probably.
Cool. Twitter. It's real.
Tag Twitter is real.
All right, bet. And but yeah, cool. Thanks for coming on, Arnav.
Thanks for
and
having
sharing
me.
some dope wisdom and vulnerable stories.
Yeah, no, totally. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you all for listening. And as always, be infinite, my friends.